Blame It on Vanity by Denise Vanity Matthews, Chapter 8. Blowing bubbles, there's a big black forest beating in my heart I see, where children dragging ice skates, dangling kites are flying free, whispering in the dark, wishing into stars, begging for the jelly beans in chocolate cookie jars, puddling tears are left behind on pillow-feathered beds, raking leaves and chasing rainbows and wishing wells we fed. Suffer the little children, let them come unto me. Chapter 8. Sinking our heads into the bottom of a stained, cracked porcelain sink bowl, we elbowed each other to see our faces in the mirror. They stared hard at my long, shiny black hair. It didn't twist or curl around my fingers as easily as theirs. You're supposed to be our sister, Patty sneered. I replied, not wanting to think I didn't know it. How come her hair is so straight? Debbie whispered softly under her breath. I like it, it's pretty. She touched it tenderly and so soft. You can't imagine how many nights I spent sleeping in small pink sponge rollers trying desperately to create a curl like theirs. Then, one grave morning at the break of day, my stepmother put a bowl on top of my head and cut off all my shiny black hair. Sobbing pitifully, I watched as my tresses tumbled to the floor and onto the newspaper dated 1966. I can't tell you how many times we all fought like wild alley cats toppling one another. But they were my sisters, and soon we would share many things in common, especially the tears, the pain, and the unforgettable long suffering. Racism was a violent matter, growing fast like poison from the parents to the schoolyards which filtered into the streets. And such was the case with the wicked children in our neighborhood, hissing and cursing when we walked by. That was why we kept ourselves to the opposite side of the street, being careful not to raise our eyes as we rounded the bend toward our little house. They called themselves the Hunters. I surmised it was the clothes we wore, the shoes that didn't fit, and the old dilapidated home we walked out of that kept them heckling. I was too young not to take it personally, and my fist felt the same. Daddy would say an eye for an eye, and I was very afraid of the whipping that would follow if I didn't obey his voice. I've not forgotten the orange and black bus that dropped us off at the railroad tracks on our way home from school. A shabby old trailer store stood faithfully in the mud. All the neighborhood children would arrive with popping eyes for candy and little brown bags to fill them in. I was in heaven, that being the height of our day. Debbie grew taller, even though the night and anything that fell from a tree branch or brush Debbie devoured. Alas, there she was in the distance, hiding in a corner where I knew she wanted me to find her. Tears cascaded down her sad little brown cheeks. Her eyes were so big and dark and round, like a little wet bunny left out in the cold rain. And so I would use the edge of my sweater to dry off her tears and tell her, "It's okay, Debbie." The children at school pecked away at what little confidence she had. She couldn't run as fast and she wished her gangling legs would take her. She couldn't run as fast as she wished her gangling legs would take her. She shook when they confronted her, and the enemy seemed to be everywhere but hiding. "Don't cry any more, 'cause we don't want Daddy to know," Patty instructed. The snot ran down her nose, and she wiped it on her sleeve. I thought to myself, she's got to clean that stain before Daddy sees it. "I'll get even with them tomorrow," I said aloud. "You'll see, I'll get 'em." Debbie knew she had bigger problems, for the inevitable was about to happen and no one could help her. My legs were too short and my fists were too small, and as much as I wished I could rescue her from a beating, sadly I could not. She hardly ever made it home without wetting herself, and it was impossible to make it all go away before he got home. Her bladder was weak, and her punishment made her weaker. Daddy didn't take kindly to hearing any bad news before a few bottles of beer emptied into his belly, and having had quite a head start, by nightfall he became a loaded shotgun. I had a secret. I hated him, and I hoped he'd never made it home. He was my space between a rock and a hard place, and our house was a dead-end street. This cursed place had sucked me in, and how I'd wish it would spit me out. My wishes were sent sneaking off somewhere, far to play hide-and-go-seek with total strangers. I was depressed. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel, and make sure you leave in commentary. Let me know how my reading is, if it's too fast, if it's not slow enough, if it's monotonous and boring. Negative and positive comments are welcome.